If you want to know whether or not the Ferrari hype is real, then this video is for you. Because honestly, yes it is, and we can't stop it. And I know that you're going to be saying that testing times don't matter, but do you honestly think that people care at this point? No, they don't. And for those of you wondering if I'm going to bring up that crash that Lewis supposedly had around the Spanish GP circuit, then yes, but not in the way that you might expect. Because I know that many of you out there might have looked at that crash and then just gone, aha! I knew it! Hamilton is washed! Well, I mean, not exactly. But in truth, I don't really care about the crash because I'm more fascinated with the overall narrative that we've seen about the Hamilton-Leclerc Ferrari story in just the last few weeks. I think it's quite safe to say that it has transcended all reality. To call this anything but a success is just really lying to yourself, because Ferrari is having a field day with the reception that this has received, and that everything right now is going according to plan so well that people do not care about McLaren. I know, it pains me to say that. But seriously, any headline that has McLaren in it, oh, people don't give two hoots about it. Ferrari, though, oh, everyone's here for it. Which has resulted in the Ferrari hype train being so long it would put Snowpiercer to shame. Oh, sorry, was that a bit too niche? It's a bit like Schrodinger's cat, you see. No photos, just some basic details, and Charles Leclerc was slightly delayed in his own testing program. Was it a huge wreck or a minor bump? Nobody knows 100% other than Ferrari themselves, but oh boy, the speculation was wild. And the interest is even wilder, because look at these top 5 most read articles on GP Blog. 4 out of 5 of them are about Ferrari, Hamilton or Leclerc. People are hooked, especially on the story of Lewis outpacing Charles on day 1 of testing. I mean, just look at the numbers. I am pleased, though, that people are interested enough to know who's racing in Formula 2 this season, and that's nice to know. Could this be Hamilton's best shot at a real comeback for the first time in, what, like 3 years or something? Maybe. It's certainly getting off on the right track, because fans are already hunting for any sign of dominance between these two drivers, especially if it's Lewis doing the dominating. But that was just one day, because Charles then went to be the faster of the two drivers on the following day, with Lewis 2 seconds off of him, essentially. Don't worry, I am not saying that there is a clear favourite, just hear me out, okay? But as you can tell, the narrative changed within the space of 24 hours, even less than that. People were thinking one way, and then they were thinking another. And then they'll go back to that original way, and they'll go back that other way again. It's just going to vacillate almost every single day as to which one of them will come out on top. Can you just wait for a second and just realize here that maybe Ferrari are onto something really good, which may give them a really big chance of getting the Constructors' Championship next year, or if not in 2025, then in 2026 for sure, because there are plenty of factors that really need to be considered here. And no, it's not because McLaren were there too, and what battle could be deduced from that, because they're all teams that are busy doing the same thing, working for Pirelli, nothing more. This wasn't a test concerning speed. It was all about data, specifically for Pirelli's 2026 tyres, which will be very different, which will be much narrower to reduce grip, weight and overall car width. And also, the cars the Ferrari were using were not exact replicas of the cars that we all saw in Abu Dhabi. You heard the term mule car, right? And you might not be sure what exactly that means. It basically means it's some sort of Frankenstein car, which means that it's a bit like the 2024 car, but slightly tweaked to accommodate the 2026 prototype tyres, as well as making sure that it's not a complete copy of what they were racing before. It still looks way better than the 2009 mule cars. I mean, my goodness. The 2008 cars with most of the aero taken off with those really ghastly front wings and tiny skinny rear wing. But these are here to meet the testing regulations that Pirelli want. They're not here to gather performance stats. And also, the teams cannot gather the data from the cars to use in developing next year's car anyway, since the rules haven't changed. Only Pirelli seemingly has access to the data, since that's, well, the point of this test. And also, those tyres that they will be racing with will be nowhere near what they actually get for next season, because there'll be plenty of other tests to undertake and other things that will be tweaked. The whole point of this was for Ferrari to give Lewis Hamilton as much track time as possible, as well as using the testing of previous cars allowance of 1,000 kilometers. This was a gift that Pirelli could hand to them, meaning they could have that extra bit of time, or at least that's how I interpret the rules. I'm not quite sure whether the 1,000 kilometer limit includes Pirelli tyre tests, or whether or not they are separate allocations, but either way, Lewis is getting as much track time as possible, and that can only be good for his acclimatization within the team. But either way, It cannot hold a candle to the preparation time that Lewis Hamilton got before he even started in Formula One, back when you could test, if you could afford it, as often as you would like. And according to some estimates, Lewis managed to get down an entire season's worth of track time before he even set foot in Melbourne 2007. But since testing time should not be taken as gospel, what can you infer from these tests? And yes, the crash. Really? Is Lewis going to be faster than Charles? It's still too early to tell. But one thing Ferrari can take from all of this, regardless of Pirelli or the mule car, is this. Lewis Hamilton is not significantly off the pace of Charles Leclerc, who's been around the team for donkey's years. That is a huge relief for anyone concerned at the factory, at the testing team, and the tifosi. That, okay, Lewis isn't that far off Charles, be it slightly ahead or slightly behind. He is not drowning within that team. And that is something everyone will be really, really happy about. The second test day had Leclerc 2 seconds ahead though, but remember, testing is all about running programs that the teams and Pirelli want, not chasing lap times. Longer stints with heavy fuel loads can easily account for huge time differences like that, because as Martin Brundle often points out, 10 kilograms of fuel adds about 3/10 to a lap time. And according to some estimates, F1 cars can burn 10 kilos in about 4 laps or so. It wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility for maybe Lewis doing a longer run on the behest of Pirelli, maybe about 20 to 25 laps, a good solid stint on a particular compound to gather some information as to how this 2026 prototype handles heavier cars with a little bit more fuel in the tank, graining, etc. I know it's getting a little bit nerdy, a little bit scientific for some of you, but this is very important to remember. But it's not about making excuses. It's about understanding the purpose of the test. The real takeaway? Speculating over who's faster right now misses the point. There'll be some Leclerc fans who will look to that second day of testing and say that their guy will waste Hamilton. But as far as I'm concerned, the last couple of weeks have told me this, is that Ferrari are incredibly happy with their purchase of a 7-time world champion. But yes, I will bring up that crash, but don't worry, I am not going to be tearing into Lewis. I know I said I wouldn't bring it up or dedicate an entire video to it, but I do feel like it's part of this discussion, but not in a way you would expect. Are Ferrari upset that Hamilton crashed the 2023 car and that Leclerc's own testing program was compromised in having to repair the damage? No, I wouldn't say so. In fact, I would go as far to say that they might have been happy that Lewis had crashed the car. Lord, are you serious? Why would they be happy about having to repair the car like that? Why would they be happy about Lewis crashing the thing? Well, it's all to do with what the teams probably expect from their drivers, especially Lewis, to push the car to its limit and maybe go beyond it to see whether or not the car can cope. You could interpret that crash as Lewis trying to find the limits of the SF23 in such a short space of time that he felt confident enough to even give it a go, to try and go and take that final corner flat out. And besides, we all recall Ferrari's 2023 entry being incredibly skittish, the team sacrificing downforce from the previous year's entry to ensure better reliability and less fragility, which didn't work as well as hoped in the grand scheme of things because, well, Charles Leclerc lamenting, making a religious pilgrimage to try and find some solace. Yeah, that wasn't great. So for Lewis to crash the car, it's not that big of a deal, especially since it was the SF23. And testing is just that. It's not there to get a refined result. You are there to test the car to find out where it breaks and where it doesn't. As well as, of course, to establish a narrative, because you control the circumstances and the parameters and the programs. You are not going in a typical practice session where things are mandated by the FIA. You can run things more freely and privately. And quite frankly, I think Ferrari are quite happy that Lewis felt powerful and fired up enough to even give it a try, because the worst the situation would have been is that Lewis may not have been confident enough to really push the car to breaking point, that he would have played it safe, not take any risks for fear of crashing the car and causing negative headlines. No, Lewis seems so immersed and absorbed and enthralled right now with his experience at the Scuderia thus far and his reception with the Tifosi that he wants to give it a good show, seemingly, and just go all out. And as we've seen with the SF24 mule car, he was doing just fine. No crashes or accidents or anything like that. No, it's all going well for everyone concerned. Not to mention Lewis getting an additional few hundred miles on Pirelli's dime. Yes, to some of you, I understand. You may not care about this, that Lewis Hamilton, where you are, is not really that big of a deal, and that I might be exhibiting my British bias here, but I'm mainly taking a look at this from the perspective of Ferrari and the overall perception of that team, and essentially for the whole of Italy. So maybe you could say I'm exhibiting Italian bias. Think about this from the point of view of Fred Vasseur, who now has 2 drivers which he knows very well from their early days especially. The ideal outcome of all of this testing before the real pre-season testing and season begins with the brand new car is for Lewis to be ready, and for Charles to be ready as well. You don't want one driver thriving whilst the other is struggling because there's a team title to consider. You want both of them to be prepared, and you want them to be fired up and energized for the tough battle ahead against Red Bull, McLaren, and maybe even Mercedes, which is what you're seeing right now, right here. That there are no alarm bells going off at Maranello. You're not hearing any rumours from the Italian press saying that, oh, Lewis Hamilton is not gelling well at all with the people in Maranello. None of that at all. It's all very silent in that regard. In fact, everyone's screaming the opposite. You hear instances of local towns around Fiorano and Maranello completely gridlocked for people wanting to take the pilgrimage to go and see maybe Lewis Hamilton somewhere within that town and area. I think there were local states of emergency because of it. That is not something that happens every day. I don't think even Sebastian Vettel got that. I don't know whether Michael Schumacher got that because the data isn't there to be had, but you would assume that that was the case at the time. But for Lewis, absolutely. That is just a pure cold, hard fact. I think Ferrari were anticipating something like this to happen, but I don't think they were ready for this level of attention, hype, and admiration. The entire country has been whipped into a frenzy. It's become quite clear that in the last 2 weeks, the arrival of Hamilton in the country and for the team has been a complete, unmitigated success that nobody saw coming in the way it actually yielded. Because in the here and now, the headlines about whether or not Lewis Hamilton can actually do well at Ferrari, they have really faded into the background. Now there seems to be complete and utter universal acclaim that, yes, this was definitely the right decision for Lewis Hamilton to depart from Mercedes and then go to Ferrari. Everyone's now going, this was a brilliant decision. Look how happy Lewis is. Look how happy Ferrari are. Oh, it's going to go so well. More and more people starting to believe in the dream that Lewis could be a contender for the world title. The dream that Lewis has had ever since he was a child, which is exactly what Ferrari wanted to be manifested. They came close to Team Glory last year, and this passion might be enough to G up the team and the Tifosi that little bit more. So I didn't think it was really possible, but indeed, the momentum and hysteria and hype and admiration has moved forward and enhanced itself ever since Lewis Hamilton took that photo outside Enzo Ferrari's abode. I didn't think it was possible, but here we are. And even if things don't work out for Lewis or Ferrari in the long run and no 8th title is to be had, that picture will be a snapshot of the entire relationship and the team's history, wherever it actually ends up. However, it has evolved since then, and what we can establish thus far is this. At least for now, Ferrari have not bought themselves a very illustrious lemon. A driver who has nothing left to offer from the sport and may as well retire and go do something else. Far from it. Things have been going according to plan for the Scuderia, seemingly. And I think it's safe to say that if the pre-season championship is anything to go by in terms of public interest and overall appeal, Ferrari have taken it by a country mile, even going so far as the team kit, which admittedly in some circumstances look like that everyone's ready for a game of darts. It's certainly a lot more appealing than the Red Bull and McLaren team kits for next year, if these leaks are to be true, because oh my goodness, it's night and day. I would rather wear a pinstriped Ferrari shirt. Yeah, no, Ferrari has won the championship hands down. Second place maybe going to Carlos Sainz's journey at Williams, and even then there are some Ferrari connections. I'm pretty certain that the Tifosi are wishing Carlos well, wherever he may go, and thanking him for his services alongside Charles, not causing any trouble, doing what he can, and also being part of the Ferrari recovery drive ever since the disastrous 2020 season. Carlos played his part. But equally, I'm pretty sure that they want to be seeing their new lineup firing on all cylinders, and so far so good. But yes, in terms of hype, Ferrari are ruling the roost without question. And even though I'm more of a McLaren fan, seeing Ferrari thrive and prosper is something I'm really glad to see. It warms my heart. I want them to be up there with McLaren fighting for the title. It just feels right. Historic teams fighting for an historic prize. And by contrast, McLaren, I don't think anybody cares what they're up to at the moment. And maybe the team doesn't mind that they can get on with things in the shadows and get on about their business. Nobody's paying any attention to them. Whilst all of the headlines are all about Ferrari, and Ferrari seems to like it, McLaren seem to maybe like the silence. It's all gravy for both teams. So, okay, fine by me. But yeah, you got to admit, McLaren, people don't give a hoot. Unless, of course, it's that ugly team kit. Castor, what are you doing? And Ferrari seems to be capitalizing on this wave of goodwill, bringing Zhou Guanyu back into the fold after several years away. Now, some might argue it's purely to boost their appeal in China, but I see it as part of a broader strategy. It's Ferrari trying their best to really emphasize the ethos of the Ferrari Driver Academy and family is that being of loyalty and unity. Well, I mean, at least how they wish to portray it. And then you contrast that to what's going on in Red Bull, where every single headline seems to be about strife and doubt and concern over how the team is going to cope with 2025, or whether or not Lawson will completely and utterly fold, and then Max will be, well, Max. Zhou returning to the Scuderia sphere of influence might indeed be a shot in the arm financially for them, but it's also a sign that by having him and Antonio Giovinazzi playing double duty as the F1 team's reserve driver, they want to be solid and together, that everyone is on the same sheet, and that the Ferrari organisation treats its drivers well, unlike their Red Bull counterparts. And also, this is some food for thought here, because I feel like Ferrari and McLaren are doing something relatively similar, but doing it in a way that is slightly different, and one is more refined than the other. Throughout 2024, Zak Brown took great joy in slinging barbs and words at Red Bull at every single opportunity, saying, you can't trust Red Bull. Oh, they're real bad. The internal organization and politics is atrocious. Not here at McLaren. Yeah! Whereas Ferrari are sort of doing a similar thing, but quietly. Actions. Bringing drivers in, or bringing them home. Giving them some purpose in whatever series it may be it World Endurance with Antonio, or Robert Schwartzman, who was basically doing anything that had a Ferrari engine in it. Now he's found a home with the affiliated Prema team at IndyCar. I think what Ferrari are trying to say is that, hey, you may not get a chance at the top team because, well, we demand the best. But for the Ferrari Driver Academy people, that's okay. They'll find a home elsewhere. Ferrari won't let them down. Again, that's what I think the Scuderia is wanting to portray, as well as the wider Ferrari organisation, that they're in this together. Whereas McLaren, admittedly, they're going for the jugular. They're being very extreme and bold and cocky and confident. And whilst I like it in a way that McLaren are being punchy after years of softly, although I would want it to be a little bit more graceful, Ferrari, what they're doing right now is absolutely fantastic. But just pay that in mind. Actions speak louder than words, that they say, so maybe what Ferrari are doing might work out for the better in the long run. Now, of course, this is all happening in the belief that all will be well in 2025, and that Ferrari will have the best car possible in order to take it to their old-school rivals McLaren. However, plenty of things could happen between now and the first few races, but the pundits are fully aware of this too, whilst also giving Lewis Hamilton a little more slack than just a couple of months ago. Because one thing to really take into account here is that 2026 is right there. And whilst McLaren and Ferrari have been very ballsy and punchy in really taking things to the extreme this season, there will come a point relatively early on, is that if one team is faster than the other, one team will fall back, give up on 2025 or pay little attention to it, and then focus on the following year, because they don't want to end up in a development war like Mercedes did with Red Bull and come into the following regulations on the back foot and then spend the entire regulation cycle trying to play catch up. So I don't think Ferrari want to emulate that, nor does McLaren. So if it's not a tightly fought race and McLaren romp home to victory, don't be surprised if Ferrari pull back. But so long as Lewis and Charles and Fred are on the same page, it's all good. But at the same time, the pundits? Yeah, they are still on it, with Martin Brundle giving his 3-race warning to Lewis before maybe the pitchforks might start to come out again. That maybe Lewis and Ferrari have bought themselves some time, that all is well right now. And whilst, yes, Lewis does have to deliver on what precedes him, but if McLaren carry out their promise in producing an extreme car for 2025, leaving Ferrari's own risk-taking in the dust, then the team needs to be pragmatic and lengthen its plan's scope. 2026 will be the real acid test for the Hamilton-Ferrari partnership, with the hope that maybe this first season is a year where he and Leclerc can prepare and work together to build upon the work the team plus the Leclerc-Sainz partnership exhibited in 2024. All eyes are on Hamilton though. Can he be faster than Leclerc? That's all people want to know though. That's how you boil it down. I talked about multiple things in this video, but I think the biggest thing that people care about is like, we just want to know whether or not Lewis is faster than Charles. And I think that kind of misses the point. I find it fascinating, but it's more nuanced than that. You don't want Lewis running roughshod over Charles. You want them to be together, close. And I know that those two drivers are doing the best they can to cooperate and learn from each other and become good, firm friends and allies, but I just don't want the fandoms taking this to the nth degree or an insane degree and really pitch both drivers against one another. It can happen. We saw it happen at Mercedes. It got completely and utterly out of hand, and that's the only way I think this could be derailed. But right now, so far, it's all playing nice. But I do admit, it is a concern that I have, and I really hope Ferrari are aware of this and they're not being ignorant, that they have two of the biggest influences on social media as drivers, and that their fans want to be superior over the other, the Lecfosi, Team LH. It is a thing. You have to consider it. You cannot ignore it. And you cannot ignore that Lewis himself has expressed some reservations about today's ground effect cars. But if there's one thing Ferrari fans can take heart in, is that Hamilton seems energized by this opportunity for real. And that might be all the motivation he needs to be able to get back to where he was. And as Juan Pablo Montoya might said, not even Max Verstappen could beat Lewis Hamilton if he's back to where he was in his prime. And the team has done a very good job in getting him acquainted with Ferrari's culture, and also Lewis as well for embracing it. And when you couple that with the incredibly dour nature and ex-partner atmosphere that is brewing over at Mercedes as of late, where basically you can just picture Toto Wolff looking from a distance and seeing Lewis all happy and then being all bitter, you're not quite sure what's going on there, what the team is up to, what has Toto got up his sleeve, what kind of drastic move, the vest pocket maneuver, is he going to play next? Is it going to cost any of his current drivers their seat or anything like that? It's all uncertain. And it's very, very tense. It's very, very bleak and vague and uncertain and confusing. Whereas Ferrari, no, it's crystal clear. They're happy right now. There's a sign of unity throughout the main lineup and the reserves and the Tifosi. So far, they are playing a blinder, and you cannot ignore that. If you're not a Ferrari fan or a Lewis fan, you got to admit, this is going really well for them. They are completely capturing the hearts and imaginations of the Formula One fandom before the first Grand Prix is even properly set up and finished yet. One thing is for sure, a sad Lewis does not a champion make. But the Scuderia, they're living up to the dream the racer had since he was a boy, and the world is more than enthralled in following every single detail. But will it actually lead to results on track? That is for the first few races to decide. But one thing we do know now, throughout all of these tests, even though the times do not reflect the full story, is that Lewis is not floundering. He is not way in over his head. He is settling in just fine. And for Ferrari, that is fantastic, both morally, spiritually, and financially. And contrast that to Mercedes, and whilst I hope they could really move on from Lewis in a positive manner, the overall situation looks incredibly vague, bleak, and confusing. No one's sure what the team principal is about to pull out of his hat, and whilst change is necessary, it could impact the one man who has waited patiently for his time to shine as team leader without question. To find out why I think George Russell is being done a disservice and that his future at the team should be a lot more clearer than it actually is, watch this video next, straight after this one.